Simon, thanks. Thanks for
I know.
joining.
I think we're here. I think it's
Yeah.
live. We're
Yes.
still learning this technology, Stuart.
Eventually, we're saving up to get a countdown. You know, that'll be a big moment.
It's when
So
you grow
how
up.
goes it from occupied DC?
It is still occupied. We've thankfully had beautiful weather, which has softened the blow a little bit. But the big guy's back after disappearing for a few days, and here we go. I mean, a really consequential fall is underway. We have to pass a budget and prevent, or the government may shut down, and the Republicans are going to try to sort of cement this agenda and jam as much of it down our throats as we can. And so this is going to be a pretty consequential fall. And I think for all of us, and we have the elections, right? We have, really meaningful
Yeah.
consequential elections in November. Early vote starts in Virginia just in 17 days. It's hard to believe. It's like we'll
Yeah.
have people voting. So I think part of what, we need to all get ready is to get out of, I think the American people will be returning to school and work. They're going to be assessing the landscape of where their country is and where the economy is. And it's important for us to be very loud and talking to them as much as we can, because I think that as much as Trump has been rejected, and he has been, the polling numbers continue to be terrible for him. We need to continue to degrade him and drive him down further. And we need to make sure that with these elections are everything we need them to be this November. So we have big work to do, I think, in the coming months.
Yeah, I'm always sort of both mystified and frustrated, and I should not be mystified because I've seen it so many times as you. This idea that there needs to be a message, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not how you win. If you think about campaigns as arguments in front of a jury, you don't just get up there and say one thing. All right, that's it. You got it. We're done. I mean, you build the case, and there's lots of different elements to it, and different people can always say different things. But as a consultant, I always thought that my role was to figure out what the candidate did best, and try to help them do that great, and just make sure that they aren't so terrible and everything else that it's disqualifying, but put them in a position where they can go out and do it. So I look at this guy in Maine, and I love his message. I love his passion. It couldn't be more real. And then you look at somebody, like Senator Salkin's very different, but that's
Yeah.
okay. They're very different people. They have different backgrounds. And I think that this pursuit of some, when we had campaign message discipline, we like to call it, we had, jobs weeks in education. We never worked then. So we always just kidded ourselves,
Well, because Stuart, as you know, and is that a lot of our politics operates at this higher level than a message, right? It operates around story and narrative. And I think we've gotten it backwards in some ways in the Democratic Party, is that, the message is what comes last in the execution. It's the last mile, right? What you got to get right is the story. And what I've been writing about at Hopium for the last few weeks is that Trump has a story he's telling every day, right? He wants to make America great again. And that's where he lives. And then all the pieces, fall underneath that. It's like words on a page. They only make sense if there's a narrative and story holding them all together. And we should be more concerned about creating sort of some common story, I think, about his harming the country and his abandonment of the democratic order, his abandonment of the global liberal order that America ran for 80 years up until the last few weeks, that there is a story we need to tell. And then every time we speak and deliver a message, it's reinforcing the story, because messages can be ephemeral. They can be something that's, they're not durable and strong. As you pointed out, it's about making an argument over time, telling a story over time. And I think where the reason for many people that the sum isn't greater than the parts on the Democratic Party right now is that it's not really clear what our story is that we want to tell to the American people about who he is and who we are, of which, by the way, to your point, we all can be telling different versions of that story. It's not one ironclad
Yeah.
rock bed thing. It's just a general sense of our indictment of him and our story about what we, who we are. And we've got to get better at that, I think, as Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, if I were in the Democratic Party, I would pose this as a battle over patriotism. That you can't be a patriot and vote for Pete Hegseth. You can't make the town drunk Secretary of Defense and call yourself a patriot. You can't say that you care about America and you have somebody like RFK Jr. up there. I mean, this tragic, terribly deranged guy who, defends being a heroin addict. No, you don't have that guy. You don't have Kristi Noem. I mean, this is fundamental. You don't roll out the red carpet for Putin. I mean, I just think about, of all the Americans who died fighting in Europe, if they all came back to life tomorrow, who decides you think they'd want to fight on, Putin or Ukraine? Yeah. I mean, and I hope the party, I thought Harris had some great moments on that in her speech, particularly. But there's a hesitancy somehow to use broad sweeping characterizations of the other side that we never had any problem with in the Republican Party, for better or worse, and I think that, look, if I just said to you, look, we have a guy who's been president, terrible, is doing all these terrible things, and what Democrats need to do is be elected and be a sane governing party and show that America, Trumpism was an aberration and return to normalcy. So that would make sense. We tried that with Biden, and he did a fantastic job. I mean, for the most part, there were problems. There always are problems, but 21 stock market highs, unemployment fell almost in half of when he took office, and what happened? Nobody cared. Not enough people cared. Yeah. So.
Well, I think, Stuart, it gets to another point that you've raised, right? Which is that we also just have to look like we're fighting, right?
Yes.
That people have to believe that we will fight for them, and that they have to see us. I wrote a piece the other day about some exit poll data, which I'll send to you, which maybe we can include in this when we release this. Is that one of the exit poll questions were a version of, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but strong enough to get things done, right? And there were a bunch of value statements about the two candidates, and Trump won that 3-1 in the polling, and where it was Harris won, heart's in the right place, wants to do the right thing. Trump won the stuff about strong leadership, strong leader, weak leader, right, that we've discussed. And it was so extraordinary, the size of it. And what I think it meant to me is that people want to believe that we are there fighting for them, mm-hmm. and that we're strong enough to actually execute on our ideas and get things done. It's not just enough to have the right ideas or to message. There's another dimension to this, which is about strength of leadership to be able to execute on your agenda. And that's why I think that Democrats in general, we don't really poll and research around these dimensions of leadership. We're very issue focused in the way that we understand politics. And I think one of the things that we missed in 2024 is that people make up their mind, particularly people who don't pay attention to politics as much as many of us do, that other things go into making up their understanding of a leader or a party other than just issues, right? About strength of leadership, passion and commitment, willingness to fight, to get things done, right? Can they actually, if they get the ball, can they score the touchdown, whatever the analogy is. And I think this is an area where our leaders have to worry sometimes, I think, about understanding that in a moment like this, compromise can become appeasement, right? That I shared a piece that from Foreign Affairs magazine, a historian who wrote about what happened in Nazi Germany and sort of the reasonable people trying to negotiate with Hitler and how he just ate him alive and then continued to build and that they believed they were doing the right thing. And yet their negotiation was actually appeasement and capitulation. And I think this issue of what the dimension that I think is missing from the Democratic Party right now, that's most important, and the thing that would unite is the fight, right? You're seeing it with the response to your point about the guy from Maine whose name I know he's so new to the scene, right? I don't know. And what we're looking for is we're looking for warriors and fighters in a time of enormous challenge for the country. Patriotism without the fight is insufficient. And so I think these are things that we can do. And I think part of what happened this summer, Stuart, is that we saw through the Texas Democrats and through J.B. Pritzker and through Gavin Newsom, we saw Democrats starting to find a higher gear. And we need to keep going. We can't stay there. We've got to stay, we've got to continue to find a higher gear in service of our country in a time of enormous challenge, and to not be satisfied with where we are. We should be satisfied with how much Trump has fallen in polling and how I think he's lost his persuasive ability to bring along a majority of the country. Every major initiative he's put forward has been rejected. He's been unable to gain majority support in recent months. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Whether it's the occupation of DC, the bombing of Iran, his powers of persuasion are ebbing. I think he's in physical, cognitive, and political decline. But now we have to get bigger and stronger and more powerful. And I think it's why these elections coming up and also the budget battles that are coming are an enormous opportunity for us to tell the American people who we are in this time of crisis. And I would concede your point, right? If what anybody knew about us is that we loved our country and we were fighting like hell for it, and we were, we're going to be in this battle to the end, that would be a powerful message for us to send, instead of us always looking like, we're the reasonable ones who want to cut a deal, which sometimes that's not the right way to fight a battle, right?
Strong and wrong will always beat weak and right. Always. And I think your point about there being an overall narrative, the idea you have, this is a true statement. If I just woke up in the middle of the night and said, a criminal is running on a crime issue. What? Like a convicted felon is running on a crime issue? Is he a reform felon? No, he's not. He's not a reform felon who has his criminal defense attorney. First of all, the idea the president has a criminal defense, sort of mind-boggling. Go down and cut a sweetheart deal with the most notorious child sex trafficker of our time, and that person's running on the law and order. You can't let that happen, and you have to be out there. And people say, well, you can't just talk about Trump. Well, the problem is the question isn't really talking about Trump. You're talking about the party, because the party itself is Trump. There is no non-Republican party, and or non-Trump Republican Party. And he is a criminal. And you don't need a criminal coming in here trying to tell anybody how to run their own, how to improve on crime. The guy pardoned like cop killers.
Or maybe he does know a lot about crime, right? Maybe he's bringing his expertise to bear.
This weekend, I committed gross criminal acts, I'm sure, with these crypto stuff.
Well, the decision today that came down that he had violated the Posse Comitatus Act, right, and that had acted illegally in Los Angeles, is very consequential for this discussion around this false story of he's fighting crime. Look, we fight crime with local police who know these communities, that are accountable to local officials, and it's how democracies work. The notion that we're going to use the American military not against Russia or against our adversaries around the world, but against the American people themselves. I think part of what's happening, Stuart, and we've talked about this before, is that I think as Trump feels his powers ebbing, like literally as he ages and grows weaker, that he is growing, that he's escalating, that he's growing, he's needing to create more spectaculars to restore his strength and power and manhood that is ebbing and leaving his body. But also, I think just the sheer act of him putting the military near him in Washington, was he protecting the city or was he protecting himself?
Yeah.
I think he is growing deeply worried about his rejection from the American people. Even just this floating that they're going to have some kind of national emergency around housing. It's like them waking up to the fact that people hate him. There, everything is, a majority of the country has really turned on him, and that part of his powers ebbing is this loss of his control over the daily discourse in the country and his lack of persuasion, his persuasion capacity. And so I think I've been going on for a long time about this, but just to put an exclamation point on this is that I do think that part of what we have to anticipate is that he's going to continue to escalate as he grows weaker, and that this is part of a dynamic. I call it the I had a phrase for it. I'll come back to it in a minute, but it's a vicious cycle of a failing strongman,
Yeah.
and that we have to recognize that he's doing all this. And I think the greatest symbol of this is him putting the military like not too far away from the White House as a way of him showing his insecurity and his lack of his worry about how things are turning against him domestically in the country. And so I think we have to operate in this two-track thing. We have to continue to mitigate the damage that he's doing every day, and we have to use all of our powers to win back power through elections and traditional ways of political fighting here in the United States and elections. And we have to be able to do both at the same time and keep both in our minds at the same time, in my belief.
Yeah, I mean, I just go back to this because it's very personal to me. The governor's mansion in Mississippi is right downtown, and Jackson, Mississippi. So the governor of Mississippi, if he walks out his front door or back door, he's 3 times more likely to get murdered than if he's walking around D.C. before they send any troops. And yet he's sending 200 National Guard from Mississippi, disrupting their lives. This is what National Guard's supposed to do. First of all, it's not the president's to call, but they're leaving Mississippi. If National Guard really worked, he would have them like outside his door in Jackson. And it's, I don't know. I know that there's a debate. You say it's like same thing with immigration. Well, you can't talk about immigration because that's talking about a strength. You only can talk about economy. But by talking about immigration and by talking about the ICE raids, about just the spectacle of them, how much it seemed unsettling to people, Trump's losing immigration now.
Right.
And I think you can do the same on crime. I go back to, it's fascinating to me. It's very difficult to name one person who embodies the horror and tragedy of school shootings. And yet Republicans made that horrible situation where a woman was murdered in Georgia. They used her as a symbol of everything that was wrong with crime and immigrants and all of this. And I don't understand what with school shootings. You can do the same if you just personalize it, if you talk about it. But it's, I don't know. I think the tentativeness in politics is just so dangerous. Better to be all in.
Yeah, better to be all in, particularly at this moment. And I think I think that the way I'm trying to approach the fall is to view it as one of opportunity for us, right? That we can win these elections that we need to go win. For all of you who are watching, right, if you haven't given money or volunteered for any of the fall elections and you've got a variety that you can choose from, please commit to do that. We need, you can be volunteering and donating and helping out in these fall elections. We also can be doing things to get ready for 2026 and helping our candidates and our state parties, get stronger and learn and because if we're going to flip the Senate, in the House, we have to be better about winning in red places and red states and red places. And there are things we can be doing now to help our state parties and our candidates who are intrepid candidates who are running, come out of the box really strong in 2026. And so I think that, my view about where we are, Stuart, now is that I think that where we have to get to in our heads is that, we have to be a little bit like the Ukrainians with Russia here, which is we have to start getting wins, right? There has to be clear, demonstrable victories. These drone attacks that are taking out Russian infrastructure are so critical. We have to stop approaching every day from a defensive mindset we have to stop being shocked and awed, right? We know where we are. We understand the battlefield. He is weakened and he's escalating. These things are all happening. We understand where we are now. And we have to focus now on victories and getting wins to show our movement, the pro-democracy movement, that, because I have this line that, with little wins become big wins and little cracks can become big cracks. And it's very critical now that we start being strategic and being on offense and not just playing defense. It's a mindset, right? It's a way of approaching. It's a way of overcoming the timidity that you're describing, where we're just going to leave it all on the fucking playing field. And because it's what is the time requires. And I do think that, understanding that we could, I think what I wrote today in Hopium was that we should try to commit as a movement to have the story of the next few months be that we're turning the tide against Trump. I don't know that we can do that, right? Because we have now suffered through years of his strength being constantly overestimated and ours being underestimated. This is sort of the general default of the national media, that we're always weaker than we are, and he's always stronger. And so, but now it is critical, I think, given how weak he really is politically, how weak he is physically, how weak he is cognitively. I mean, his press conference, his proof of life press conference today, he continues to say some of the most incredible batshit crazy stuff that any of us have ever heard anybody say, right? Whether the person on the street that we walk by or in civil settings. And so, yeah.
Did you watch J.D. Vance in that press conference? I've seen buzzards on the side of the road watching roadkill with less gleam in their eyes. I mean, this guy, he was just waiting for Trump to keel over to go, well, let's see what it's here. Thanks, thank you,
I think the fact that JD even sort of allowed himself to speculate, when was it, 10 days ago, about the transition was kind of an unbelievable tell, right? Like, he's not just measuring the drapes, he's already like ordered, ordering them all, right?
I tell you, man, if I was Trump's Secret Service, I'd be watching out for that guy, man. Maybe get a food tester. That it's something. It's so important when you're talking about. Back in 20, in the Lincoln Project, we had some conversations with Anne Applebaum, and one of the things, which I'm such a fanboy of hers. I pass out Twilight.
Me too, by the way. Plus one on that.
I pass out Twilight of Democracy in airports like Watchtower. Random strangers like read this. But she was talking about the importance of there seeming to be in the majority, and that how these populist right-wing movements have a way of assuming strength and taking the appearance of strength that they don't really have, which goes to a sane sinner. What is a sane sinner? A sane sinner is quiet. A sane sinner has a life to live. A sane sinner isn't going to be out there in the streets. But you need that. You need that sense of a cause, of momentum, of running to the sound of the guns. This is important. This is what we can do. And I just don't, I think it would be a good day if you woke up and Republicans were saying, well, Democrats can't do that. Whatever it is, get them responding to you. Whether or not, you're announced that you're going to nationalize Starlink. You're going to nationalize SpaceX the first day. You're going to cut off funding for the executive branch. Whatever it is, make them respond to you. Make them say, no, you can't do that. Because
impeach RFK. Impeach RFK, right? Or reintroduce the
criminal investigation into all the Doge stuff.
Listen, I had a conversation with Greg Sargent earlier today about this, right? So one of the things that we have to focus on, I think, is that the stories that were written today about Trump, a judge determining that Trump had violated the Posse Comitatus Act, and the way that gets written is that laws were broken, right? It isn't that Trump broke the laws, right? It is in the passive voice, right? Laws were broken.
Mistakes were made.
Right. Mistakes were made. No, I mean, it is literally, criminal things happen. They break laws, and a judge finds that Trump was, for example, the tariffs, right? Trump has illegally, unconstitutionally asserted this, this power that he doesn't actually have, that is not, and as if the consequence to that is he just has to stop doing what he's doing, as opposed to he broke laws or kidnapped children or, trafficked children, right? The 600, Guatemalans that got blocked this weekend, right? That the judge determined that it was unlawful. But there comes a point where it's our responsibility.
I agree.
To communicate that Trump broke those laws, that laws were not broken, that criminal behavior is happening, and that we are going to hold him accountable. J.B. Pritzker did this, by the way, in the presser he did the other day, where he said, if they come in here and do bad stuff, we're going to hold them accountable. This gets to your timidity issue, Stuart, is that we have to speak forthrightly. We have an obligation and a responsibility to speak forthrightly to the American people about what's happening to them in their country. And holding back and softening the edges and pivoting to things that are more comfortable for people, that's not our job right now. Our job is, frankly, to make people uncomfortable about what's happening, not to make them comfortable, because what's happening is disastrous for the future of our kids and our grandkids. And I think that, we can, I think that we have so much that that flows from this notion of getting out of the defensive crouch, right? Going on offense. And I'll give you another example, right? Not only should we be saying Trump committed crimes and will be held accountable, as will anyone else who's enabled him, that we should impeach RFK. And that, what about bringing back the Russian sanctions bill? It had 88 co-sponsors, I think, in the Senate. Mike Johnson said it would pass the House. Trump continues to get kisses and, back rubs from Trump while he, pisses off everybody else in the world. We've got to change the dynamic in the U.S. around our relationship to Russia. We have tools to do it. And we should be demanding that this bill get brought back and passed now, given that Putin has now violated all of the, Trump, by the way, the deadline for Putin to play ball was yesterday. Right. And where was Putin, right? Shaking hands with Modi and with Xi, and creating this disastrous visualization that we saw yesterday of Trump now pushing and accelerating the post-American world, right? I mean, it's as if one of his great responsibilities and jobs in his own head was to end the American democracy, to end the American global liberal order as part of his central his central commitment. And it's like, we have been unable in our movement, and if I'll just say this last piece, is that what you were trying to get at, Stuart, is we need a rallying cry.
Yeah.
We need a rallying cry, right? What are we fighting for? We're going into the battle, but what is the battle? And the battle isn't to restore Medicaid cuts, as virtuous as that is, right? We can't build a movement around restoring Medicaid cuts or delaying the ACA subsidy cuts for a year, right?
1994 fight. Yeah. When I go back to something, the guy who ran U.S. intelligence in World War I famously said, "Gentlemen don't read other gentlemen's mail." That same person, cut to 1944, Secretary of War, as was called, is sitting in his office trying to decide which city should drop nuclear bombs on, Hiroshima or Nagasaki. And he ruled out Kyoto because he honeymooned there. So I just wish the Democrats could get beyond that we don't read other gentlemen's mail and get to the bombing, the nuclear bomb, like picking out the cities faster, because you have to adapt. And what Trump, they don't have any. They'll say anything. They'll do anything. And if it just goes unopposed, and you have to characterize it. Yeah, I think you have to say these are bad people. I think you have to call what RFK Jr. is doing. This is evil. And what Trump is doing with Putin, this is evil. What they did with Maxwell.
And it's dangerous for
us.
Morally
wrong. It's evil.
And it's dangerous for us, for all of us, right? I mean, this is not something that's abstract, right? I mean, we are less safe today as a nation than we've been in many generations. We are, we're trying to bring back the most deadly infectious diseases that are going to do incredible harm to the American people. This is material and concrete harm to us today and to the future for our kids and our grandkids. We should be able to fight. I wrote this weekend that we need to fight the battle that's in front of us, not the one that we wish we were fighting. And I think that there are some times when, there were elements of our family that still haven't sort of accepted the reality of what this fight is and the nature of the battle that we're really in. But it's time now. And I think even I was a little encouraged by Senator Schumer's dear colleague letter today. I felt the language in there was far more muscular and aggressive and direct than I had seen him in recent times. I feel like there was an evolution in his, I think he read the tea leaves over the summer and saw how Pritzker and the Texas Dems and Gavin Newsom have kind of excited people. I felt more punch in Schumer today than I had seen. Let's see if it continues. But I was optimistic by his initial dear colleague letter today. I thought it was much more assertive and aggressive, perhaps not as much as we would want, but it's certainly way more than where he was 6 weeks ago. And I think that our job, Stuart, I think, is to continue to help our leaders understand what's required of them now. I mean, I think that's part of our job,
Somehow Republicans are going to try to make Democrats defensive over a guy running for mayor of New York who wants to maybe try 5 city-owned grocery stores. While you have Republicans that are nationalizing key industries like Intel. We're going to have like a 5-year chip plan now. We're doing the Stalinization of industry. Well, this is really socialism from grocery stores. But we'll take 10%. We'll become the largest shareholder of Intel.
Wait till we find out that, as part of our 10% share, that they're going to have to take Don Jr. as a board member. Right. I mean, that's the stuff that comes next. Right. I mean, that's because I think we will, when we get to the other side of this, which we will, I think we are going to come to know that Vladimir Putin was Donald Trump's coach. And that he, because Trump is embracing Putinism abroad and at home, and that the nationalization of industry and the beginning of the outrageous plunder of our government and self-enrichment that we're seeing. The Trump family made $6 billion on Monday, on Labor Day, due to the sale of one of these meme coins that they have. And the scale of the, and so
nobody even asked him about it, I think, at his press conference.
He didn't get asked about where he disappeared for a few days either, by the way. And I think that, the scale of the self-enrichment that we're all living through is unprecedented, but Trump had a model for it. He had Russia, right? And I think that, the question becomes is now whether or not he's going to start, by the nationalizing or taking a cut out of the industry or whatever it's going to happen, whether he's going to start forcing his allies, onto the boards of these companies and start having his family members
Listen, what gets me is, why does Tim Cook think he's going to stop at Intel? Intel is just an on-ramp. Why not Apple? Why not Meta? Right. Why not Google? Why would you just take, just Intel? Once it's okay to do this, once you convince people it's good,
right?
I don't know. Son. I remain.
Listen, welcome back. I hope you had some time off.
I really believe that the election was grossly misinterpreted. That it was not the 24 election. It was not an endorsement of Trumpism. And I think that the Democratic Party has much more attractive leaders, both up front and in the wings, coming forward. I don't really know who's out there as Republicans. J.D. Vance. I mean, it's just this intensely unlikable guy. So, which they're aware that if this is decided by elections, they're in trouble.
Right.
Which is why they're trying to curate these elections.
Right.
Well, look, brother, I can't let you go without thanking you for everything you've done and everything you're doing. And if you're out there and you're not a paid subscriber to Hopium, you should immediately correct that. There's a lot of stuff out there, but I have a very short list of stuff that I read every day, and Simon is at the top. And what I find interesting, I don't want to embarrass you here, I never know exactly what you're going to say. Most of us who write, we have maybe 4 things we say. So you could just really at a certain point go, well, this is number 4. There's really no need to write it out, and you have this very omnivorous mind that looks at this in sort of a big picture that I think is really needed.
So can I tell you, can I comment on this? Because I never really talk about hopium, right, with people, because we're just talking about issues. I'll just say two things about this, Stuart. One is that I don't know what I'm going to write every day. I literally, I have sketches and things in my head, but I sit down in the morning and what I try to do is I try to give people what I think is most important that day, just that day, right? It's not, and it's, you want to get up, you want to read something quick. Sometimes it's not so quick at hopium. Sometimes it goes on, but I try to present what I think is most important that day. Because I think that part of the discipline of beating Trump is to acknowledge and understand that what he's trying to do is to get you to chase these unimportant stories all day long. And so part of our defeating him is being disciplined about not chasing what I call the new, right? And the stuff the chum that he throws out all day long that he wants us to go chase, the rabbit holes that he creates for all of us. And so I try to exemplify that in my own writing, which is that here's what I think is the most important. I describe hopium as an import letter, not a newsletter. I'm not sharing what's new. I'm sharing what I think is most important. And so we do also return to things and try to understand them through new lenses. And so I appreciate you raising that, because it's actually something to be honest, that I'm really proud of, but it's also sort of how hopium evolved, which is that hopium for me is like a daily meditation on this moment, and where I get up in the morning and I have the blessing to be able to sit down and try to make sense of all this insane shit that's happening and try to keep focused on how to get us to the other side. And what a blessing it is to be able to do that, and to feel like you're making a difference in a time where I think all of us are desperately trying to get up every day and do everything we can to make things better for everybody else. And so hopium for me has been, an unbelievable blessing, and I'm so grateful for the people that have made it possible, the hopium community itself.
Yeah, it's an interesting process that in doing so, you're both inspiring hope, but having reasons to be hopeful. And, I always thought that phrase that Biden used over and over, "Don't bet against America," was such a powerful phrase. So, well, listen, brother, thank you.
Keep fighting. Welcome back. Listen, everybody, this is it. Like, we got to make this, we got to win the fall, as I call it. And just, thank you for being part of this amazing community with Stuart and all of his cronies that are doing such amazing work every day. You guys have built an incredibly powerful and important machine. So thank you for that. And, heads down, we got to just keep working hard, folks. And Stuart, thanks for the opportunity to have these talks. I really always look forward to them.
Thank you, Simon. Talk to you soon.
See you, everybody.